This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. I'm your host, Miles Taylor. The blizzard of lies and illegality continue. Today, the president told some whoppers in a speech about the American economy, and frankly, had some very strange moments too, which we'll show you today. He also chose to lie to the American people about something that's provably false, that all of us know is provably false. We'll tell you what that is, and we're going to set the record straight today. And then, threatening Americans in blue states, Donald Trump, in the same speech, went on to say he is going to cut off federal funding from states that do not get on board with his extremist immigration crackdown. This is a big deal, a very big deal. I will tell you why today, and I will tell you how we are going to defy it. And then top DOJ prosecutors are resigning because of Donald Trump's handling of the shooting in Minnesota. They are refusing to comply with the lawlessness and walking out on the job. We will talk about that, what it means, and those patriots today. And then, according to the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump is souring on one of his senior-most lieutenants in the cabinet. Stay with us. We will talk about which enforcer that is, why Donald Trump is souring on them, and why that may or may not be good news for America. With us today is best-selling author, former U.S. presidential candidate, and spiritual leader, Marianne Williamson. We will chat with her about all of this and more. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. Okay, we kick off today from the jump, talking about what happened in Donald Trump's speech that was notionally supposed to be about the economy. If you caught it, you probably noted that Donald Trump had some sort of inexplicable freakout while he was lying through his teeth about affordability. So we're going to take a look at that here in a second. But what I will tell you is this: Donald Trump has been using these speeches about affordability to tell the American people things that are provably false about the American economy, namely when he talks about prices. Here's the thing. Donald Trump, whether it was before the Christmas holidays when he went and did a speech to the American people in prime time, whether it's when he went to Pennsylvania on the stump, or whether he did this speech at the Detroit Economic Club, has been telling people prices are going down, prices are going down. Well, this is provably false because we all go to the grocery store. We see the truth. But take a look at how Donald Trump explained this today and that bizarre freakout in the middle of his remarks.
Out even more plans to help bring back affordability. And again, remember, that's a fake word by Democrats. It's an election about high prices that was caused by the Democrats and that I brought down a lot. And remember, when you see energy coming down like I brought it down, and gasoline coming down, that brings everything else down. The donuts come down, the truck that delivers the donuts, the stove that makes the donuts, the whole thing, it all comes down. And remember, though, I always say, because normally when that goes down, the world comes down. Meanwhile, grocery prices are starting to go rapidly down. Rent is down. Airfares are down. Hotel rates are down. Cell phone prices are down. And we're just getting started. Ladies and gentlemen.
I don't have an answer for you for what the president of the United States was doing in that speech. I think he's given us one more reason to worry about his mental health. But while we don't have an answer, what I can tell you we do have an answer to today is that Donald Trump's claims of triumph on the economy are false. As a matter of fact, it was pretty easy to debunk the things that Donald Trump said in that speech, because this morning the New York Times wrote an article exactly about the opposite of what Donald Trump was saying, about how prices have gone up. Food prices had their highest 1 month increase in years this past December. Grocery prices are up. Beef prices are up. Coffee prices are up. Fruit and vegetable prices are up. Cereal and bakery prices are up. The only good news, the only thing that was true in Donald Trump's remarks is that, yes, egg prices are defying the trend. Egg prices fell 8% in December. One of the few declines Trump has highlighted that has been truthful. But I don't need to give you these numbers, because if you are listening to this, you probably eat food. You probably go to restaurants. You probably go to the grocery store. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. You know the president of the United States is lying. But this is not a rarity for Donald Trump. It's just something that was notable in his speech at the Detroit Economic Club, that in a speech to people notionally about what was happening in the economy, he led entirely with lies. But there was something more significant that happened in these remarks today, and misquoting prices wasn't that only fumble from Donald Trump. He made a rather bold and alarming statement involving sanctuary cities. Let's listen to that, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Additionally, starting February 1st, we're not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities, because they do everything possible to protect criminals at the expense of American citizens, and it breeds fraud and crime and all of the other problems that come. So we're not making any payment to anybody that supports sanctuary cities.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Donald Trump just said that in about 2 weeks, the federal government is going to stop making payments to sanctuary cities and states that have sanctuary cities. What he means by payments is things the federal government is supposed to spend money on in those places. You may ask, Miles, well, how significant is this? Well, by some measures, between a third and half of states in this country have cities that have what could be described as sanctuary cities policies. Let's just say it's a third. Donald Trump is saying he is going to cut off federal dollars to you if you live in those states, primarily blue states in this country. What kind of federal money gets spent in those places? Money to protect you against terrorist attacks, money to respond if your state's hit by a natural disaster, money to improve infrastructure, transportation, social services, the things you are paying for with your tax dollars, the things you expect the government to do to protect you. This is a big deal. Now, this is not going to be without controversy. Last Friday, a federal judge temporarily blocked the Trump administration from doing something like this. The Department of Health and Human Services tried to freeze about $10 billion in social services funding to California, New York, Minnesota, Illinois, and Colorado. That funding would have cut money for cash assistance, childcare, and other social services, with the administration citing, quote, fraud concerns. The states say that the move is unconstitutional and punitive, and that's why the judge's order pauses the freeze for 14 days while the case proceeds. But Donald Trump is talking about doing something much, much bigger here. He's talking about 2 weeks from now telling states, at least 17 states across this country, no more. You're not getting any more federal money unless you get on board with my immigration crusade. Now, let me be clear. I'm a lifelong conservative. I've gone out there publicly and talked about sanctuary cities policies, and I'm going to tell you the truth about sanctuary cities. When you hear that term, Donald Trump wants you to think these are cities that are harboring illegal immigrants and refusing to let the federal government enforce the law. That is not true. A sanctuary city is not breaking immigration law. These are just cities that have decided to only cooperate with ICE to the minimum amount that the law requires, and not to do anything beyond that. Not to hold detainers, not to hold people in jail longer so that they can be picked up by immigration enforcement, not to do additional background checks beyond what the law requires for immigration purposes to help out ICE. They do what the law requires and not anything more. But Donald Trump now wants to threaten those cities and states in which those cities are to make them comply with his extremist approach to immigration enforcement. Believe me, folks, if this is allowed to go into effect, you will feel it. Imagine if you called 911 and instead of the 911 operator saying, "What's your emergency, 911?" the operator picked up and said, "911, What's your party affiliation? Or 911, do you live in a blue state or a red state? That's potentially what is about to happen, is Donald Trump is threatening to cut off federal assistance in those places because of their political affiliation and whether they're aligned with him on immigration or not. I struggle to think of anything comparable that any president has ever done in such a partisan way. And I take you back to 2020, when people like me from the Trump administration came forward and said, if he gets reelected, this is what he's going to do. He's going to tie a string around federal funds that go to people in blue states. He's going to deny them federal support if they don't align with his agenda. This is nothing short of coercion and intimidation. And I also predict federal judges will find that it is nakedly illegal. Stay tuned on that front. You can expect more lawsuits. I want to bring my co-founder of defiance.org into the conversation. Xander, this is really important because the federal government happens to do a lot of things that impact people's lives. And Donald Trump threatening to cut off the money until they get on board is the type of coercive tactic we would expect from him. But now that it's potentially arriving, could really be disruptive to American life.
Yeah, I think I have the same reaction as Trump. I think that's also.
What is that?
I'm happy he said it first. For me, it is a feeling of deep dread. Look, I'm happy we built this organization to be dynamic in these moments because America is going to have to get familiar with a set of tools and strategies we haven't had to use before. My mind immediately goes to, and I'm not saying we're calling for this now, a tax strike. If the federal government isn't going to deploy the funds back to states to so folks can have services, why are we sending the money there in the beginning? I know that's an extreme step. We're not there yet, but we need to be ready to respond at the scale of the issues that we are facing with this president.
Well, look, I like you said, we're not there yet, but I can't blame any American who ends up on the receiving end of this from saying, well, what on earth am I paying taxes for?
Yes.
I mean, look, within days of this happening, if it happens on February 1st, if a federal judge doesn't impose, a sweeping injunction on this, which I would expect something like that to happen, there will be a natural disaster. I mean, there are natural disasters every single week in the United States. Statistically, there will be flooding somewhere. There will be tornadoes somewhere. And guess what? If it's in one of those blue states, according to the president, they're going to say, sorry, we can't help you. You don't get any money until you start bending over backwards to help our immigration agenda. An immigration agenda that most Americans now see and is defined by officers shooting through the windshield of cars against unarmed people and murdering them. I mean, that's extreme, but that's what the president of the United States appears to be trending towards. So, this is alarming. I mean, the president already has a history of refusing emergency funds for blue states. He has a recent history of withholding public safety funds. I mean, New York, for instance, he recently withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in counterterrorism funds to New York City to punish them. Counterterrorism funds, this is money that literally keeps people from being killed by violent criminals. Donald Trump, the Trump administration, has withheld that money from New York and other states as a coercive tactic. This appears to be getting a lot bigger.
Miles, and famously, when you were working with them, he withheld funds from Puerto Rico, and let that island remain devastated for this prolonged period of time. It makes me think, though, you brought up he tried to trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. Maybe a blue state can get traded to Denmark. We can get, if I can get Oregon traded to Denmark, maybe I can get out of this mess.
Well, I mean, it is scary. I mean, back then, the example I used when I came forward in 2020 was California. In addition to Puerto Rico, is during the wildfires in California, we were on a conversation with Donald Trump about it, and he said, I don't like the governor. He doesn't support me. The people of California don't support me. I don't want to send money. Mr. President, their houses are burning down. This has nothing to do with politics. And of course, we talked him out of it, but that was the mindset a lot of us knew would come into a second administration and would not be opposed by his loyalists. Now, we are not helpless here, Xander, because at the top end, I said there are things that we can do about this. And short of a tax strike, which is the more extreme example, although again, like I said, I can't blame people for saying, why should I pay taxes if the federal government is shutting off money and assistance to my state? But short of that, there are going to be a lot of things that happen here in the immediate. And you can expect a flurry of lawsuits against this administration before this even takes effect. I would imagine right now, some of our close allies in the pro-democracy space, some of the top lawyers in this space, are looking at this, determining it is obviously illegal. It's punitive. Under the U.S. Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, the President of the United States can't take action against you because of your political views, and that's clearly what's happening here. And so there's going to be lawsuits. I assume there will be preliminary injunctions in this case, but this is something to watch very closely. And even though it was just 30 seconds in a speech, this could be one of the more significant things Donald Trump does at the start of this year.
Yeah, he's never going to be someone who sees himself as a president of all Americans, even though they didn't all vote for him, right? And, unlike every one of his predecessors, he's never going to be that. So, and he's never going to stop searching for tools in his toolkit to amass power and rule over us like a dictator. And so, luckily, the courts have been on a winning streak lately. Our friends over that have been suing the administration have been on a winning streak. I imagine that remains the same here.
Yeah, well, one thing I will say is that there is an aspect to this where we are going to take immediate action as a club. So if you are not following defiance.org, I urge you to subscribe, follow us, consider joining as a member, because we don't look at things like this and say, wow, this is really bad. There's nothing we can do. We look at things like this and say, what can we do every single week? We are not the navel-gazing, doom-scrolling type. And one of the things that we have decided to do, which we'll talk about in more detail, Xander's going to slap my wrist if I preview too much of this. But tomorrow we're going to announce steps that we are taking to help people respond to this sweeping and lawless ICE crackdown across the United States. Real, practical, actionable steps that people can take, and organizations we are going to team up with to push back. Real stuff. I'm very excited. Things that could potentially save human lives. We will talk about that tomorrow. Every Wednesday on Defiance Daily is a weekly mission brief where we talk about the mission we are going to take that week to counter Donald Trump's abuses of power. So tune in tomorrow. We will talk about that. We will talk about what the Club for Courageous Americans is doing in this moment and what you can do to jump in and fight back. I want to bring in our special guest who is joining us. Today we are joined by Marianne Williamson. You know her as a spiritual leader. You know her as a former presidential candidate. You know her as a best-selling author. But what you don't know is that she is one of the people that inspired us to create this organization. And more specifically, she is someone who got on a phone call with me and said, Miles, stop thinking about it and just go do it. Marianne Williamson, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for pushing me to stop toying with the idea of defiance.org and just get it out into the open.
I might have slightly sped up your process a little bit, but I don't think that it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I have admired you for a long time, ever since your first book. So, and I acknowledge you today talking about telling people tomorrow things that they can do to make a difference, to fight against the unbelievable transgression represented by these ICE raids, really obviously getting more disturbing every single day. And I think that when you say you're going to tell people what to do, I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is people feeling powerless, like they don't know what to do. But I think even without the important instruction from people such as yourself, different organizations they can be part of and so forth, I think that all of us, if we think about it on any given day, all of us have one congressperson, all of us have two senators, all of us have ways, whether it's sharing a video, sharing video content, whether it's making our own. I think that there are ways that each and every one of us can contribute to this field, this sort of collective field of regenerative movement on any given day. And I think that sort of psychological change inside all of us is not only possible, but will make a tremendous difference when more and more people wake up to their responsibility on a daily basis.
Marion, I want to ask you about what you've been seeing with these ICE raids. I mean, look, I'm a pro law enforcement guy. I spent my career in the national security community, but what has been done with this agency is not routine law enforcement. I mean, the president of the United States has hijacked this agency. He's started to turn it into his pocket police. I do not say that lightly, but I say that very specifically because they are managing ICE out of the White House. They are managing a law enforcement agency to go pursue cases based on the president's biases. For instance, the reason 2,000 plus ICE officers are in Minnesota is because the president hates Somalis. And this isn't because of some fraud investigation that opened up a month ago. I could take you back 10 years and talk to you about how Donald Trump had this inexplicable animus towards Somalis. And so now his pocket police, real people, real law enforcement officers with badges and guns are going places around America because the president is upset with certain categories of people. That's really scary stuff. Big picture, I want to ask you, how does this affect the psyche of a nation? Because even if Donald Trump left office today, this is a remarkable breach of the public trust for something like this to happen at all.
This is more than a breach of the public trust, even when you keep calling it a pocket police. This is the president's personal paramilitary force. This is not a law enforcement operation. This is a law violation operation. I think that the American people are waking up to the fact that we have concentration camps in this country. These are not targeted operations. Billions of dollars are being spent. Thousands more agents are being hired. They are being hired from aspects of the population, portions of the population that we know represent some of the people least concerned with constitutional principle. Due process doesn't even hardly exist. The operation that I think people did vote for was they're going to go get the bad guys. They're going to go get the rapists. They're going to go get the murderers. We know how many times the U.S. citizens have been taken. We know how many times questionable arrests have been made. The Renee Good situation makes it very, very clear that these ICE agents are now given the opportunity to be the judge, to be the jury, and to be the executioner. According to J.D. Vance, they have complete immunity, which is based on nothing other than the fact that that's what they want. This is fascism. Mm-hmm. This is not like a transgression. This is something that is, I think, Miles, later in the day, we're further along down the road to worst case scenario than I think most people even think.
There's no doubt it is getting exactly that dark. And, the only thing that I'll add to that is my one note of optimism, Marianne, is as we are going further down the rabbit hole into Wonderland, Alice is realizing that she's in a nightmare and not in a dream, to abuse the metaphor. And I think the public is belatedly waking up. I mean, folks like you and I wanted people last March to be this aware of where it was headed. We wanted people to be aware 10 years ago of where it was headed. Yeah, I mean, you were so vocal in the lead up to Donald Trump running for office in 2016, when he became president, during his term. I mean, you had unequivocal moral clarity about this. But that doesn't mean that now that it's happened a second time that we're hopeless. And I know you and I have that conversation with a lot of folks every day. It's like, okay, we're in it now. I told you so is not going to get us anywhere. But listen, folks, this isn't the end of the line, because you can step up and do things. And I'm encouraged that we've seen more and more people do it. I mean, I said this yesterday on our program, but on Sunday night when I saw Jerome Powell's video, my immediate reaction was, oh my God, he's going after the Fed chair. But my reaction right after that was, wow, the Fed chair on a Sunday night got in a suit and tie, went to the office and said, screw you, Donald Trump. I'm not going to let you do this to me, and put that video out. I thought that was bold and ballsy from a guy that, this is not a criticism, Jerome Powell, if you're watching. I don't think you've normally been described by your friends as bold and ballsy, but boy, was that a moment that proved you had those qualities in you.
I hate to say we have to find our inner Jerome Powell, but I understand what you're saying. And I agree with you. And I certainly didn't mean to suggest that this thing is over. You know, they say that we need, what, 3.5% of a population. A critical mass is what we need of people to take personal responsibility for what's happening here. And not only does that include ideas such as you're going to be giving tomorrow and that others are saying we can do in our local communities and so forth. I'm reminded of a line from Mahatma Gandhi when he was asked, who is the leader of the Indian independence movement? And he said, the small, still voice within. I think that any of us, if we wake up in the morning and realize, you know, every time you see a video that's infuriating to you, it's important to remember that millions of other people are infuriated as well. And when we think in terms of traditional political activism, it's stuff that's out there. People know it's happening. But I think, and you and I have had some conversations similar to this as well, I think some of the stuff that's the biggest acts of resistance are going on behind the scenes. I don't think everybody's saying everything that they're doing. I don't think that they should say everything that they're doing. A lot of these people who are being fired, a lot of these people who are resigning, they know things. They know how certain situations operate. And I think that we're at a point where, much like in World War II, you're talking about an underground. I think some of the resistance is underground, nonviolent, peaceful, but there are some very smart people in this country who know how to jam the works of some very, very illegal things that our government is doing. And I think they're listening to people like you, me, Kucinich, so many people, and are simply getting the internal guidance. They know what to do. And I think that if enough people stand up and say, you know, I'm going to do this today, or I'm going to do that today, and know that we're just part of this zeitgeist. You know, this is not a moment, Miles, of the soloist leadership model. It's the moment is a choir leadership model. It's each and every one of us singing our note, playing our note, doing what we can on any given day. It's gotten to that point of that level of awakening that's necessary and that's happening. And I think in a certain way, we've only just begun.
Well, and that's really good news for those of us who have bad singing voices. This is the choir moment, and it makes people more likely to sing if they know that there's other people who are going to be singing. And I've got an example of that, Marianne. I mean, our second story today that we were going to touch on is the fact that we just had 6 federal prosecutors quit in protest in Minnesota after the Justice Department ordered an investigation into the widow of Renee Good, the woman who was fatally shot by an ICE officer last week. Those prosecutors, they objected. They objected to this directive to go investigate the widow for her clearly First Amendment protected ties to protest organizations. And I think their resignations are an example of what you just said. I mean, normally,
Absolutely
again, even the example...
As are many thousands of fired federal workers. You know as well as I do, there are a lot of people who know better. I do believe that the American people are decent people, and we have a conscience. Individuals have a conscience, even though this administration is without one. And I think that what you just said about the officials in Minnesota, I think every single day things like this are happening, and people are paving their own path toward resistance that could possibly matter.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I want to get your sense of what other ways can folks be inspired in a difficult moment to do the right thing for the long term. I mean, you've talked a lot about in your career how short-term thinking can blind people to the bigger picture, and ways to make folks feel empowered to engage to protect the collective, their neighbors, their country, their future. What are your takeaways about how to do that, about how to give people that moment of moral clarity and the permission to be courageous?
Well, I don't think people need someone else to give them moral clarity. Someone just needs to remind them that it's time to have some. You know, if you look at the principles of political nonviolence as articulated by Mahatma Gandhi, then Martin Luther King went to India. He studied those principles, brought them back to the United States for application to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Principle 1 is that, as we all know, the line from Gandhi, you must be the change. Gandhi said that the end is inherent in the means. Everything we do is infused with the consciousness with which we do it. So what both King and Gandhi would talk about is the personal purity that's necessary. looking at our own selves, our own character defects. Dalai Lama said, in order to save the world, we must have a plan, but no plan will work unless we meditate. Now, what he was referring to there is something that we all know at this point. What is happening is an assault on our nervous systems. People are frantic, people are frenetic, people are sort of falling apart on the inside. So a level of self-care is necessary that has to do with kind of turning ourselves into spiritual political athletes. If you pray, if you meditate, mindfulness, yoga, whatever it is, so that you're not constantly at the psychological effect of the insanity that's going on. We have to be here, as you said yourself, for the long haul. We have to be people who know how to personally endure this moment, transcend this moment, and transform this moment. So that's number one. Number two, I think none of this would have happened had the American people not lost our contact with the threads of American history. That was one of the things I most appreciated about you, Miles. And it's a terrible, on the other side of this, we're going to have to make sure that never happens again. So I think a lot of Americans are reading up about the Constitution, reading up about the Bill of Rights, reading up about the American history and other social justice movements that have gone before. I think some of it is intellectual, some of it is psychological, some of it is external activism. It's all of the above. This is a whole systems breakdown. We need a whole systems response. It's just like in the body, you have an integrative approach to healing. We need an integrative approach. It's who we are and what we do. And on any given day, there's something I think that each and every one of us can address, both in ourselves, in our communities, and in our country. And that's really what has to happen here. We got to up the field. We got to up the frequency. We got to up the energy. Friends don't let friends sit this out. Friends don't let friends just talk about how it's so difficult or there's nothing we can do. We have to stand up. We have to be serious adults, serious patriots, seriously courageous at this point, and do what generations before us have done and save our democracy at a time when very serious forces not only are seeking to undermine it, but in a way that has never been true before, those forces have control of the levers of the U.S. government. This is this serious, and I think if we talk about it that way to one another, then what's going to happen is that we're going to hit that critical mass and something's going to shift in a way, and it's already beginning to shift, I think, in a way that will make a difference.
I can tell Xander's over here on the screen saying, "Put me in, coach, put me in."
He's already in, obviously. Everybody on this is in, and I think the people who watch you are in, but we need to encourage each other and exponentially increasing, you know.
Man, well, first of all, it's so nice to meet. I wonder, I spent some time running the Drum Major Institute with Martin Luther King III, which is Martin Luther King Jr.'s foundation. And one thing that struck me about the difference in this moment from the 1950s, 1960s, the middle class was expanding in the 50s. There was a general belief that life was getting better for people. And it created, to your point about people being stressed, created maybe a lack or an increase in the feeling of safety that allowed people to be more generous, more giving, etc. We're seeing kind of the opposite, from Trump's base. This is a group that feels like their power and their hope is receding, their prospects are receding. And so as you talk about up-leveling, people up-leveling in their spirit and how they carry themselves in this moment, what are your thoughts on the folks supporting Trump and what we can do in this country to help them both feel safe and up-level?
We have to atone in our hearts for the fact that we let it get this bad. You're absolutely right. I agree with everything that you said. This has been going on for decades, this expanding income inequality. Over the last 50 years, there's been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom and the middle classes to the top 10% of the American people. A Republican president started it, but no Democrat stopped it. Both parties allowed this to happen. And you're absolutely right. That level of hopelessness, that level of despair contributed to the popularity of Donald Trump, because people will go for false hope before they'll go for no hope. When the Democrats were running saying, oh, the economy is good, when in fact, over 60% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, 70 to 90 million people were underinsured or uninsured, over 1 million people were rationing their insulin. So from a spiritual perspective, we have to atone, and I'm sorry, but the Democratic Party needs to own how much of this we allow to happen. Anybody with even a rudimentary knowledge of history knows that whenever you have large groups of desperate people, and that's what you're really referring to, economic despair. They give it, very above the neck words like affordability crisis. It's despair. It's people living in survival mode. When you have this large amount of people living in despair like that, I don't care where in history you see this, in what time frame, it becomes a petri dish. And out of that petri dish inevitably arises all manner of societal and personal dysfunction. This was so easy to predict for anyone who was looking. And the things that come from that kind of petri dish, number one, vulnerability to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. Hello, check. Number two, attraction to a political strongman. So I think our recognizing that we allowed this to happen and really an atonement in our hearts for this gives us a kind of moral authority to address it now. And I think what you're saying is so important, though, because at this point, you have whole generations. During the 60s, and I was there, I'm old enough to remember, people still thought, oh, we can fix this.
Right.
You have younger generations who don't even remember, they never had in their lifetimes an experience when they could say, well, I have hope. I'll be able to make it. I'll be able to own a house. So this is critical, and we have to address these things on all the levels, including what you mentioned. So I agree with you entirely.
Thanks.
Well, Marianne, I want to ask you a final question, not to put you on the spot, but I think this is very much in your wheelhouse. Of the three of us on the screen right now, you're the only one who's run for president of the United States. And I have to say, you and I may have all sorts of fun ideological policy disagreements, but I was so admiring of your ability to challenge the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the status quo when you ran. I mean, you were not held back by dogma and fear in any way. And I think so many people around this country admire you for it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump today resigned and the vice president resigned and they somehow named you vice president and you fleeted up into the chair of the presidency, what would you do on day one? Where would you start to undo the civic wreckage that we are living in at this moment? And it doesn't have to be necessarily policy specifics, but where would you start?
You know, it's interesting because one of the worst things that's happened over the last few years is this political operative industrial complex that thinks the American people can't handle an adult conversation. You know, my father was a lawyer. He used to always say, talk to the smartest person on the jury. And so they've come up with ridiculous comments like, Americans just want to turn the page and move on. That's not how you heal a life, and that's not how you heal a country. So the first thing I would do is have a very serious adult conversation with the American people about how we got here, about what is happening, and how this is not going to be fixed overnight, how each and every one of us have to be part of it. I would lay out my own agenda. First of all, we do need to have some serious accountability for some of the people that have transgressed in the horrifying ways that they have transgressed even over the last year. I would do some deep research into who is behind all this and what is actually going on here, because I to this day don't think that we know some of the players, what is happening. And I would have a very serious conversation with the American people. It's not going to be immediate, but these are the issues that we are going to deal. Obviously, we're going to deal immediately with some of the economic issues, such as universal health care, such as repealing that ridiculous tax cut and so forth. But we are also going to shore up places where our system was left vulnerable to these kinds of transgressions of our constitutional principles. And I, as president, one of the first things I would do is actually sign into law certain strictures that would make sure that neither I nor any president in the future could ever have the kind of power to destroy that this president has not only had, but used.
Marianne, you sound an awful lot to me like a constitutionalist. How radical to embrace something like the United States Constitution. But in this moment, it sounds radical compared to everything we're hearing on TV from Donald Trump.
Well, I think that's what Americans are understanding, that our allegiance is to the Constitution. This is what he swore allegiance to. All of these people, they swore allegiance to a Constitution that they are shredding every single day. First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, these people don't care. And I think it's important for us to face the fact, as difficult as it is to face it, that they know they're doing that. They intend to do that. It is that dark.
I have to say again before we let you go, Marianne, Xander, myself, the members of defiance.org are incredibly grateful for your leadership and grateful that you gave me a kick in the pants the day that you did in October to just roll this out in the world instead of spending 3 or 4 months running focus groups and talking to people. It was the right move. We have taken so much action in those 10 weeks and in large part because of you. So we are incredibly grateful and we hope you will be willing to join us with regularity.
Anytime. But you know what? What I said to you, and I think you're giving me too much credit there, but thank you, is what we all have to say to each other. There's no time. There's no time. There's no time. This window's closing. Come on, whatever it is, just do it right now. It's not going to be perfect. None of us are perfect people. Just do it right now. They're doing it. We need to do it too.
100%. You would have loved
Marianne Williamson.
you would have enjoyed our internal meetings leading into this.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Nice
Spiritual leader, former presidential candidate, best-selling author. Fantastic to have her here. I will just say, Xander, I mean, that's even though she didn't want the credit, Marianne gets that credit. I'll never forget.
You're not making that up. You told me that before we started.
Sitting here at this computer, going downstairs to Hannah and afterwards and saying, Marianne says we should just go. We have the idea. We have the core of it. We should just do this and not do the classic Washington thing of like, oh, let's go consult 50 other people and see what they think. In fact, I think her line to me was, don't ask anyone else. And then my next phone call after talking to Hannah was to you. And I was like, how soon could you get this off the ground with me? So thank you to you and her.
As her like answer to your, what would you do as president? It's like, get rid of the like, political like advisors who don't think people can handle a real conversation or tolerate mistakes or whatever. It was nice to hear her say that. The other thing that was awesome to hear her say is atonement.
Yeah.
Like as much as we were giving Trump shit for gaslighting everyone on prices, Joe Biden was doing something kind of similar. He kept telling people how well the economy was doing and using measurements like how the stock market was doing or how GDP was growing instead of, egg prices, which now became, famous in the presidential race. The establishment and the leadership on both parties that were in place before this that led to the frustrations that eventually led to the election of Donald Trump cannot get back in power unless they atone, unless they talk about what they did, where they failed, how they gaslit Americans, and talk about how they're going to do it differently this time. And I think she's 100% right. We still haven't heard enough of that from the folks that were in power then that are still in power now, for sure.
Well, look, I will tell you this. If folks don't have the fire in the belly, I want them to hear Marianne Williamson's finger snapping as the low click of the ticking clock that should get them to get their asses off the couch and do something. I love that. I'm feeling that. I'm going to take Marianne snapping and bring it in to give us that momentum when we're in a conversation that deserves the urgency. So fantastic to have her. We have to bring her back. And I actually think the conversation with her, Xander, leads well into our final story of the day, which is that the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump has been repeatedly complaining about one of his key aides, one of these people who has been a lead enforcer of this autocratic agenda, and that is Attorney General Pam Bondi. Apparently, Donald Trump in private has been calling her weak and ineffective at enforcing his agenda, according to the Wall Street Journal reporting. Officials say the criticism reflects Trump's push to pressure the Justice Department to act more aggressively on his priorities. In recent weeks, Trump has discussed appointing special counsels out of frustration with what he views as slow progress over there at DOJ. And a key grievance is Bondi's failure to quickly prosecute figures who previously investigated him, including former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Now, the reason I say this is relevant to our conversation with Marianne is that two things are possible. One, it can be getting darker. And two, we can feel more empowered to do something. This story has both of those things built right into it. It can get darker because I have no illusions that Donald Trump would consider replacing Attorney General Pam Bondi with a moderate or someone who wants to restore the rule of law. He's probably going to try to replace it with someone who's even more willing to violate the boundaries of the rule of law. And yet, this shows that the Trump administration, in its first year, as intimidated as people have been, does not have it perfect, has not perfected their approach to autocracy, has its own weaknesses and internal divisions that the opposition is going to exploit. Because in those moments of change, and I tell you this firsthand from the first administration when Donald Trump repeatedly threatened cabinet secretaries and switched them out, in those moments of change between one cabinet secretary and another was the opportunity to show everything that was going wrong in a department or agency. That's when, for better or for worse, the infighting broke out into the open and illegal conduct in some cases was exposed. There's a possibility there. So if Donald Trump is souring on his attorney general, well, I say good riddance. And the opposition is going to take that opportunity to highlight their misconduct top to bottom. Xander, I want to bring you back into the conversation there and just get your quick take before we jump into our final segment. This is the musical chairs that we always see with Donald Trump. It appears to be starting. There were rumors before the holidays he was going to get rid of the DHS secretary. Now he's leaking about his attorney general, or someone around him is leaking about his attorney general. This is what Donald Trump does. He threatens the people around them to keep them on their toes, but that can't last forever.
Yeah. I hadn't thought one of the issues with Pam Bondi is she's not sycophantic enough. That wasn't on my bingo card for top issues with Pam Bondi. But you're right. It's a never-ending loyalty test. This is the crazy thing. I guess there's always a greater fool that's going to sign up for it. The idea that aligning yourself with them ends in some sort of glory or some sort of long-term partnership. The guy doesn't do long-term partnerships. You are a tool to be wielded and used until you are not useful, and then you will be discarded and defamed when you are discarded. Not just discarded, but defamed. So, I guess there's always a greater fool to sign up.
Well, look, let's chat about our final segment of the day, as always, which is who is joining the Defiance. And this is an interesting day for the answer to the question. Is today we are going to talk about an organization called the Trevor Project. Now, why is this an interesting day to say that the Trevor Project is joining the Defiance? Because today, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on banning transgender athletes. And experts are predicting that the Supreme Court is due to weigh in favor of that ban. And with that, we want to spotlight this organization because one of the things that the Trevor Project does, whether you agree or disagree with sports and transgender athletes in sports, put that aside. The Trevor Project does something very, very important here. The Trevor Project supports people with suicide prevention intervention who are in the LGBTQ community and people who feel ostracized by this public debate, who might try to take their lives because of the way that they have been denigrated by the President of the United States. And interestingly, Xander, the Trevor Project received a $45 million donation from philanthropist Mackenzie Scott, the largest gift in the organization's history. This is interesting because the funding comes after internal turmoil and the loss of a $25 million federal support grant last summer when the Trump administration ended that support to groups that were trying to prevent people in the LGBTQ community from engaging in self-harm and suicide prevention. There is a crisis line that folks are familiar with, the 988 crisis line, and a lot of people were worried that all of this support was at risk when Donald Trump and team pulled the plug. But the nonprofit now says that this unrestricted grant from Mackenzie Scott will help stabilize its operations and support its suicide prevention hotline, which serves hundreds of thousands of young people every year. I've got to say, this is a great spotlight. This is a great news story that even when the administration is trying to shut down these organizations by withholding federal support, that there are patriots in this country who will step forward and say, you know what, sweep the politics aside. We're talking about protecting human lives. Mackenzie Scott is one of those patriots. The Trevor Project is an incredible organization.
It's great to hear. Mackenzie's been a great philanthropist from day one when she got started on this journey. She goes big. She's trying to defund herself over time, having a hard time doing so because of the way stock market's going. But she's cut checks like this over and over again. It's really nice to see her step up. The Trevor Project's super impressive. Miles, I don't know if you remember when we were working on Section 230 reform. They're part of the coalition we brought in.
That's right.
And they have really interesting stances because anonymity has been, really helpful for a lot of teens that are in the closet or trying to figure out what's going on to find other friends across the United States that can help them work through what they're feeling. And to your point, they're builders too. They built their own social network. They built this suicide hotline. Great organization, real adults. They do fantastic work. It's good to see them get this check and be stabilized moving forward.
Well, there's one thing that I will note that's sort of interesting on top of all of this, Andrew, which is Mackenzie Scott, as people probably know, the former wife of Jeff Bezos, is the one that's giving this money. What's great about that is Jeff Bezos, unfortunately, I've watched him take a turn towards supporting Donald Trump. I think previously he was opposed to Donald Trump, and now Amazon and his companies have been sucking up to the administration as much as possible, even creating these sort of flattering documentaries about the Trumps, like this Melania documentary coming out, which is basically soft lobbying. I mean, they've said, we'll spend millions of dollars to do this flattering documentary about Melania Trump as a way to ingratiate themselves with the White House. I love it that Bezos money on the other side is being spent to go fight this administration. That to me is pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe we will have a project one day, a skunkworks project of ethical women marrying and then divorcing these tech guys who are doing so much harm. So it seems to be one of the leading drivers of really great philanthropy between Melinda Gates and Mackenzie Scott Bezos.
Yeah. Well, one addition to add to this segment, Xander, of who is joining the Defiance, let's call this an honorary mention and an important one, which is that news just broke that Claudette Colvin, whose refusal to move seats on a segregated bus helped spark the civil rights movement, died just hours ago at the age of 86. I believe she was 15 years old. Yeah, that's right. She was 15 years old when she refused to move seats on that bus. A seminal moment in this country, and one that I think has got some sort of spiritual connected tissue, Xander, to this moment that we are in right now. I mean, that was a major sweeping movement, grassroots movement across this country for change to uphold the promise of the United States Constitution, the promise that all men and women in this country be treated equally as they are created equal. Claudette leaves a legacy that I think a lot of us can follow in this moment of challenge.
A great example of an everyday person with no advantages or connections to power that, is now remembered in history. Sometimes I think we feel powerless in these moments. Claudette was kind of forgotten by history and then remembered again. She actually did this activism before Rosa Parks. Now, Rosa Parks was well connected. I think she worked for the NAACP at the time, and they decided that they could build a movement around Rosa Parks' moment. But Claudette was even earlier than that. It's sad to hear that she passed 86, though it's nice to hear that she lived a full life. And stories like this are always inspiring. A Black Southern little girl being able to make an impact the way she did. We are all at least that empowered, most of the people on this Substack. And so, shout out to Claudette.
Well, I'll also say that, folks like you, Xander, and Marianne, and so many others have repeatedly said, we are relearning our collective action muscle here in the United States. It's not every day that we've got to go fight an autocratic takeover of the federal government, that we have to fight to restore the United States Constitution. And to do that successfully requires collective action. That's why we launched defiance.org. I mean, that's literally the conversation you and I had when we first talked about this in October. As you said, our collective action muscles have atrophied, you said. And you're like, we have to go start building organizations that steer collective action towards all the great causes. And this happened during the civil rights movement before social media. There were a zillion different groups and causes and people rapidly sharing information about them, including through word of mouth, to make sure that the right support got to where it was needed so that ultimately they were able to defy systematic repression from the top down. That is something really powerful for us to relearn.
100%. 100%. And that's why we're doing this. That's why you all are doing this too. Let's build this up. I mean, we need to not only kind of rebuild that muscle, but rebuild it rapidly as we're seeing things are happening fast.
Well, there's a relevant question here. We'll jump into Q&A for a few minutes from defiance.org members. So if you're not a defiance.org member, feel free to check us out at defiance.org/join. If you are a member, jump into the chat on Substack and paste your questions. Melissa asks, how is it that Iranians have protesters and we are in the U.S. regarded as domestic terrorists? I don't understand how Trump is so tone deaf. How can the hypocrite chastise the Iranian government for killing their citizens, but cannot see what ICE did to one of our own? Melissa, I have scarcely anything to add to that because I think that is the fine point of it, is the deep and fundamental hypocrisy. Now, I will say, I of course support the Iranian protesters. I of course want to see freedom in that despotism. I want to see the people retake their own government. But when Donald Trump says today, like he did, that those people should rise up and fight for their rights, I thought we should just clip that statement and say, and the same goes for U.S. protesters who should fight back against repression. Of course, he is tone deaf in saying this, but we are not so dense that we can't realize it. And I'm so glad you pointed out, Melissa.
We keep looking for moral consistency in the guy. That's not how he operates. He has his agenda, his team good, other team bad. That's it. And he's happy to flip-flop if it makes sense. The Iranian people can be great today and worth killing tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. It's just his agenda at all times in any given moment. So if we're waiting and holding our breath to see any sort of consistency in his stances outside of that, good luck.
Well, and I'm writing down the words, Xander, list of hypocrisies, because I've said before, and I'll say it again, that one of the most powerful ways that you can lure someone over who's maybe on the other side of the fence or not sure if they want to be a part of the pro-democracy cause is just expose them to the hypocrisies of the administration. Even members of this administration don't know how to respond when they're confronted with the hypocrisies. Kristi Noem just said the other day when she was on with Jake Tapper, she was talking about how the administration will not tolerate attacks on federal law enforcement, and the administration will bring the hammer down when there are attacks on federal law enforcement. And Jake Tapper very smartly played clips of January 6th, played clips of attacks on law enforcement. Those attackers, of course, were given pardons by the President of the United States. It completely neutered her argument. And if you saw her response, I can't remember who I was on with this week, but I said it was sort of like the blue screen of death on your computer in the 1990s when all of a sudden your computer just froze. It didn't work. She didn't know how to respond. But this is what happens when you confront people with those hypocrisies, is it forces them to see the truth. Rather than telling them, rather than me sitting here with Xander and saying, this is bad, they're lying to us. You just give them the two pieces of information and they come to the conclusion, oh, wow, they're lying. This is hypocritical. This is not new to this moment. I will say again, I don't care if people get tired of us pointing back to history. The hypocrisies are what constantly is what's used as a wedge to bring down wannabe dictators. They all rise based on hypocrisy and lies, and showing that to people, often through humor and comedy, is what ends up making that house of cards fall. So that's one example, the Kristi Noem example. The example you highlight, Melissa, about Donald Trump supporting protesters in one country and literally posting AI-generated images of himself dropping feces on protesters in this country, which he did last year, is the type of thing that we should be putting in front of people. So I wrote this down because maybe I need to write an article soon about the list of all of those hypocrisies that are easy to remember and powerful to deploy. So we got another question here, Xander, from Scotty. Scotty says, regarding holding back federal monies, are there not more laws we aren't aware of about taxation without representation? Scotty, I will say this about withholding federal money. I used to work on this committee in Congress called the Appropriations Committee. We were the little staffers that ran around and controlled the congressional purse strings. And I will tell you, I learned one thing, if anything, while working on that committee, and that is Congress tells the president how to spend money. The president doesn't get to second guess Congress when it tells him how to spend money. There is almost definitely a lawsuit or a lot of lawsuits about to be brought here about Donald Trump withholding congressional money, as we talked about earlier, from blue states in this country, and in doing so, breaking the law and not doing what Congress told him. Because Congress said, go spend money on counterterrorism in these states. Go spend money on infrastructure in these states. Go spend money on social services. And if Donald Trump says no, guess what? He's breaking the law. He's violating the U.S. Constitution. And that's what these lawsuits will focus on. Xander, you want to pick a question there from the list?
Sure. Lynn asked, what are the mechanics of a tax strike when so many have withholding taken out? It's a good question, Lynn. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know the answers to that yet. I think Miles is right that there's several kind of barriers that need to be crossed before we need to really start thinking seriously about executing on that. But I am interested, and Miles and I have been talking about this lately, on bringing in experts of strategies around how you upend authoritarian regimes when things become so far gone. I think it's great for us to start understanding the mechanics of things like this, even if it's not a recommendation or something we have to kind of pull the switch on quite yet.
I don't recommend you make Xander your accountant. Like, I'm just going to say that right now.
I'm definitely not the internal accountant over here.
You're gonna get audited. So, but I mean, joking aside, we're not quite in that moment, but there is a lot of inspiration to be drawn from general strikes in other countries, and I'm not sure we have the numbers yet. I think we're trending toward having the number of popular support. But there's an example I always point to, which is I think it was like in 1972. The women of Iceland went on a general strike to advocate for more family-friendly policies in the workforce. Iceland was really conservative about that, not giving family leave and all sorts of policies that weren't beneficial towards women in the workplace. And if my history is correct, that general strike lasted 1 day, and it had something like 90% participation across Iceland. Women who were stay-at-home parents walked out of the home, women in the workplace walked out, and the men of Iceland said, yeah, we can't have that. And immediately changed tax. And now it's one of the most family-friendly countries in the world. That's how powerful a general strike can be. And again, like I said, we may be trending toward that kind of moment against this lawless administration. That sounds radical because none of us have ever lived through a general strike. Well, guess what, folks? What is happening to us? What is happening with the abrogation of the president's constitutional responsibilities is definitionally radical. Let's take one more question here. Let's see. We have got HCM Boston asks, do you think anything will actually happen to administration officials who have refused to release the Epstein files thus far and must account for that to a judge by Friday? Well, what I can say, HCM Boston, and Xander, I welcome your inputs on this, is that the fact that Republicans and Democrats are paying close attention to this is what would be making me sweat if I was in Donald Trump's Justice Department. Is it's not just Democrats on Capitol Hill saying, we're going to hold you to account. There are Republicans saying, hey, look, we're going to bring you to court, and we're also going to hold you in contempt of Congress if you don't come forward. And by the way, if you do not release all of this information and you don't meet the deadlines, it's not like you get a pass at the end of this administration and the slate gets wiped clean. These are violations of law whose statute of limitations will not have run out by the end of the Trump administration and after the Trump administration. And I'm not saying that. These members of Congress are saying that. So those are serious threats being thrown down. I would worry if I was Pam Bondi or anyone on her team about the personal legal liability, because these members of Congress aren't going to give up on this. And so I would hope that they are speeding up the production of these documents over there. And if they're not, I think they're going to hear about it on the back end. This is not one of those things that you or I or those members of Congress are going to let those officials forget.
I think you said it well, Miles. I don't have anything to add there. That was well done.
Well, then the only other thing that I will say is that apparently my producer tells me that there is something called the Free America Walkout. I don't know much about this, but I'm telling you about it right now. There is something called the Free America Walkout that's happening on the 1-year anniversary of Donald Trump's return to office on January 20th at 2 p.m. local time. The organization is urging people to walk out of work, school, and commerce because a free America begins the moment we stop cooperating with fascism. Bold. People are doing it. People are going out there. I'll read a little bit more about what the Free America Walkout is doing. But people are going this direction, Xander. People are saying we have had enough.
Yeah, you really you can't get your interventions ahead of risk tolerance. I think people are feeling at risk, broadly feeling at risk. We talked about this yesterday with the governor as well. I think that people are understanding there's not a subset or sector or any place in society where you're going to be able to put your head down and survive this. And if that's the case, the safest thing to do is fight now. I wrote this on Substack today. The safest day to fight was yesterday. The next safest is today. It gets harder the longer we wait. And so the more people that believe that algorithm, that safety is now, organizing now, the more effective we'll be at stopping this regime in its tracks instead of waiting a year when they have surveillance and their occupation built up and all the other things that they were kind of working on now. So it's great to hear this is going on. We're going to work hard to get a leader of this movement on the program at some point before then so they can speak to us directly about what's going on.
Amen. Well, look, final exhortation to folks, join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. That is our weekly mission briefing. Even if you are not a member of defiance.org, you can watch the live stream where we are talking about what members of defiance.org are doing this week to push back against what we are seeing. And our focus is on what ICE has been doing around this country. We have some incredible guests joining us. We will have George Conway, the conservative lawyer who's now running as a Democrat for Congress in New York. He will be joining us. I think, Xander, I can say who our other guest is, or can I not say yet?
Let's not say it.
Not yet. Okay, I can't say who our other guest is. I'm hoping we have a fun, provocative, spicy guest, and we're going to have a great organization to spotlight in the conversation that we are collaborating with to go out there and push back against these abuses of power. So join us tomorrow. Come be a part of that conversation. This is an issue that members of defiance.org last month when we had our members meeting said was a top priority for them, even before what happened in Minnesota. And so we are taking action this week. I will also add, if you are not following us on YouTube, follow us on YouTube. We are going to be starting to publish more videos there and explainers there and quick reactions to what we are seeing out there on the news. So follow us at defiance.org on YouTube. That is our organization name. In the meantime, folks, as always, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together. We got this.